Hello, this is Chiara Medioli, Group Marketing Director at Fedrigoni, and welcome to Ivan Bell, who is one of the partners and super art directors of Stranger and Stranger in London. So we've got this connection and conversation, and with Ivan, you are one of our jurors of the Fedrigoni Top Award. So I'm looking forward to showing you all the things that have come so far. We've had about 350 applications thus far. So I look forward with meeting with you in person and see what you've selected, the happy few of these 350 people who will come to the semifinals. How have you kept very busy in the past couple of months with various projects, I've heard?
Luckily we have. Obviously we've all been working from home. As you can see, I'm still at home at the moment. We're hoping that in London we can get back in the studio possibly by mid-July, which would be great. So, but yeah, we've been very fortunate. We all our designers recamped at home, and we've been doing lots of Zoom calls to keep up with work. Been very fortunate. Obviously we work in hospitality, so some of our clients have been affected quite badly when others haven't, which has been really good. But it's kept us really busy, actually. Projects have continued, which has been really, really good. I think we've been very fortunate in what we do. Being designers, you can do this. You can work remotely, which is great. So, but I see that you're back in the office now as well, so that must be good for you guys as well.
It's good, yeah. It's good for morale, but it's also good for the choice of materials and things, and when you can discuss, actual pieces of things, and I imagine for you is the same, this color glass or that shape, or that kind of hue of a label and things like that. How did you cope with the material side of life?
That's been the problem. There's been lots of couriers delivering things to people's different home addresses, so it's been taking us a lot longer to decide on things. We have somebody who works locally near the studio, so they've been able to go in and send us the bits and pieces that we have. Mm-hmm. Very kindly, Fedrigoni, you were very kind. You supplied all of our remote designers with swatch books and everything, which was great. So on the paper side, that's been really good. We've been excellent being able to do that. We've obviously also with Pantone, because we work with color an awful lot, obviously, what we do. Mm-hmm. So the similar sort of thing, we had to set everybody up with more like a home studio. So everybody's got their own Pantone swatches now as well. So we've been able to work that way, but it's certainly not the same as being in the studio, because in the studio you overhear conversations and it's very easy to just join in and make comment on something. Yeah. Whereas working this way, you have to pre-plan. So you have to physically put a time in to get everybody together to talk about something, which may be only a 5-minute conversation. But if you can imagine lots of those during the day on lots of different projects, suddenly time vanishes. It's been quite hard, yeah.
And how do you think it is for your clients, so the end drinkers of what you design, to choose something digitally, perhaps, to choose something online, and you've worked very hard on the physicality of the object, on the way it reflects light on a shelf and things like that. How do you manage to suggest all of that through online sales?
That's completely. A lot of our clients have done exactly that. They've had to turn to digital side of things to actually market their products now. Which means that you and I as consumers don't get a chance to actually physically touch the bottle, take it off the shelf, have that emotional connection and really tell the whole story. So it's become slightly different in that everything now has to work, on a screen. So we're very conscious of, funnily enough, it's made us change our design slightly, not an awful lot, but slightly in what we're doing to just have more emphasis on what this 3D advert can do in 2D. So basically the label space, so they can communicate what we wanted to communicate, but actually on a screen. It's very hard to do that.
What did you change? What did you adjust?
We've been adjusting perhaps the way...
Did you do better photography?
Yes, exactly. There is luckily we've obviously been doing what we've been doing for quite a while. We have a good selection of suppliers, and we have a couple of very good photographers that work for us. So what we have been saying with our clients in particular as well is that, yes, they're spending more time now photographing things lit slightly differently, so that you can see that perhaps there's a deep emboss and texture on the paper that otherwise you wouldn't get to see because of just being flat lighting. So yes, that has changed things. Obviously, from a consumer's viewpoint, and what we do with alcohol, you know, you don't get to sample the goods anymore. If you were going into a wine shop, and most wine shops in the UK, you know, allow you to taste, but obviously you can't do that now because you're not in the shop as such. With spirits, actually,
so the bottle and the outlook is even more important because
it is
good.
Completely that. What our job to do is to build up the expectation of you and I, the consumer, as to what this is going to taste like. So the design therefore has to carry that extremely well. Obviously, if it doesn't, then we failed. But
well, this is true especially for a new product, maybe something that you're used to, maybe your favorite brand of gin. You know, you buy it online, you know, you get great comfort from the gin itself, but also from the arrival of something familiar. And then, but then if it's something new, you know, it becomes very challenging to break through the screen, you know, and we've seen in Italy that actually online sales for wine and spirits have only tinily compensated for the loss of sales or consumption also in a live environment, be it a restaurant or be it a party or at a wine store. You know, we've seen a small proportion of catching up through the online channels. It looks like it's something that people still prefer to choose or consume in a live environment.
Completely, and we've seen the same here. I mean, there has been I was reading last week in one of the trade press that there has been a 200-fold increase in online orders for things.
Wow.
But obviously that is really, it hasn't really compensated for the lack in footfall from people actually visiting bars and restaurants. So I mean, I'm hoping that obviously we can slowly start to reopen and get things back to some sort of normality, but it is very much so that you're building up an expectation with what the packaging looks like as to what this is going to taste. We've always said we can help people get their first sale of a new product by how the packaging looks, but obviously if their liquid doesn't live up to that expectation, then they won't get repeat sales because, you know, you're not going to do that.
Right. How much do you want to know about a new product, a new spirit or a new wine? And occasionally you do also olive oils, but before you start designing around that, do you know, what's your research around it?
It's research is really important in what we do. So we spend a lot of time with the client. For instance, if we were doing a whiskey, we would spend a lot of time at the distillery and talk to not just the marketing team, but talk to people at the distillery itself, then do a lot of research about the history of the place. It's amazing what you can come across in conversation that perhaps you would otherwise miss. So we find it's always very important to visit and speak to the people who are making the product. For instance, with Aberfeldy whiskey, we did that a few years ago, but we were having a conversation. We were up at the distillery and we were speaking to one of the stillmen who I think was the fourth generation of his family to have actually worked there in the distillery. And then it was just over lunch, we were having a quick conversation, and he talked about his I got to get this right, fourth generation, so great grandfather used to pan for gold in the local water source, and that's the water source that supplies the distillery. Now, that little gem then gave us an entirely different angle about the packaging strategy that we'd use and the packaging. So we came up with this thing about being the golden dram, and that stuck with Aberfeldy because it's something that was unique to them. So it's really important. We tend to do an awful lot of research before we start putting pen to paper even, just so that we understand the brand and understand where it's come from. Obviously with a new liquid, it's a similar scenario as well. So we just need to understand the perhaps where the ingredients are coming from, perhaps where the inspiration for what they're doing came from. And somehow throughout all of that, there's little pieces of that you then develop into a brand story. I mean, what we do at the end of the day, we're storytellers. So we're telling a story on pack. So it's choosing that particular thread that you can pick out and then use as an advantage against the competition, basically, because it's something that's unique to that product that nobody else can say. So yes, we do an awful lot of research before we start.
And that then reflects in the choice of the materials. And when you don't find what you're looking for, then you commission something bespoke, probably, be it in glass, in paper, or in any other, part of the packaging.
Exactly that, completely that. A good example of that is Harris Gin. I think I sent you a little presentation earlier about how we developed that. Isle of Harris is off this, in the Outer Hebrides, it's off Scotland, it's a beautiful island. The idea for building a whiskey distillery there from our client was originally to try and create jobs in the area, because a lot of people grow up on the island and then they leave and they don't return because there's no work. So the idea is
that distillery is absolutely beautiful. It's so modern.
It is completely. Now, if you think, I mean, you're lucky, you've been to see it. The space where that distillery is, when the project was first talked about, it didn't exist. It was basically the car park from where you come off the ferry. There was nothing there. It was this thing about, they had this idea about creating a social distillery, which we loved the idea, because I have relatives again that are on the Isle of Stornoway and Lewis. So basically to us, we could understand the reason for doing what they were going to do. But basically this was starting a product from scratch. Now, it was a whiskey distillery, but they initially needed to make some money, obviously. And so hence why they decided to distill gin from the area, basically, and take sea kelp as their main botanical. So we got involved in that project, but basically our brief was to bottle the island, because they wanted to sell this online. Now, this goes back to your previous point we were talking about. So it had to have such an appeal and reflect where it came from. So it's like the glass structure, everything. I've actually got a bottle here next to me. Oh, you can see here. But the bottle shape itself.
Familiar little specks as well.
You do, completely. Now I'll come back to the paper in a second, but the bottle structure itself is actually, it's quite rugged. It's not completely symmetrical. So it's very much like the island, but it's very tactile. But what we have done, because obviously there's a beautiful beach. If you've been to Harris, you'll know it. There's a beach called Luscantire Beach, which has this amazing, I don't know if you can see this, but this amazing turquoise blue color in the water up there. If you didn't know you were in the Outer Hebrides of Scotland, you would think you were in the Caribbean because of the color of the sea. But there's also this texture, so there's the ripples, but also Harris is very famous for the tweed. So basically, if you can see through the bottle, the way the ripples actually work, it creates the tweed pattern as well. Pattern. Completely.
Without scratching your skin, which is very good.
Exactly. That's completely that. And actually going back to the label, we used obviously a very textured and coated paper, but basically it's got flecks of sea kelp in there. And these labels are printed up 30 in a go, so they're all slightly different. So when you see these bottles all lined up, no two are the same, basically. So it gives you that idea. But also natural, so glass, cork, wood. So it's all natural finishes, very rugged, just like the island. So it tells a story, basically. So for them, the bottle has been a real success for them. So much so that the original idea for the distillery, I think, was to employ, 25 people in something like 5 years. Yeah. But at the end of 3 years, they were already employing 35 people. I mean, obviously, the current scenario with COVID has been very unfortunate for everybody, and the distillery has been closed, but it has been doing like most other distilleries have been doing. They've been making hand sanitizer and things like that. But and they online sales are still happening. But basically, the bottle had to do a lot of the heavy lifting, so it had to tell the story of where it comes from.
That's right.
And obviously, this bottle it's being bought on mail order. So basically, you could only buy it from the distillery itself on visiting, or you could order it. So you'd have to see it online first. So obviously, it had to do that job of telling the story first to get the interest. Luckily, I have to say they've done an amazing job with the liquid. The gin itself is beautiful. Even though I say myself, I love it.
Yeah, I agree. I tasted it on site.
Completely.
I think that bottle is a great advertising for the island itself. As you say, you know, it sums up the beautiful things about it. And I interpreted at first the ripples as the wind, because there was this majestic wind on the island when I was there. So well done. How often does the client or the drinker argue about the choice of materials? Has anyone written back to you saying, oh, you know, I wish you had put a wash-off label because this and that? You know, do you get, you know, inquiries about sustainability and choice of material and so on? I mean, you work with uber sustainable materials, you know, cork, glass and paper. Occasionally I imagine, you know, you screen print and things, but it's all, yeah.
We are, fair enough, it really comes down to the original conversation about what the aim of the product is and how they want to position it. But yes, sustainability now is a very hot topic. So we're conscious of that in everything that we select. For instance, we have a client that used to have a lot of wax on sealing their bottle. Now it's beautiful. It gives a very emotional connection to the product and sits it as being very premium. However, for recycling, that's not good, because basically you can't separate the wax from the glass,
from the rest,
and that's a problem. So we're very conscious of things like that now, about creating product that it's easier that the label can get washed off the bottle, or the bottles can be recycled and reused. The other, actually, with Harris, for instance, the other great thing is that the bottle has a second life. Simon, who's the MD at Harris, shortly after they opened, rang me. He spends half his time between Harris and the mainland, and he lives in Edinburgh. And he rang me at a weekend. He was out with his wife at a local restaurant. This was just very shortly after the gin had been launched and was available. And he was rang me and said, "You can't believe this. We're sitting in our favorite local restaurant, and every water bottle that is on the table is actually a Harris gin bottle." So
with
people were repurposing, completely, with the label still intact. So the great thing with that was that it's great advertising for the brand, but it's this thing about people not wanting to throw it away and repurposing the bottle, which is great.
If you do something really beautiful, it stays, doesn't it?
Exactly. And we tend, okay, again, it really depends on the client and the product and where they want to position it. Try and do that with everything we produce, so that it has a second life, that people will actually want to use it again, especially when we're talking about designing bespoke glass. So you're actually designing the structures themselves. So yeah, we love it. But yes, it's a very important thing now, actually selecting the right products, and especially with paper as well. It's a similar sort of thing. So it's
does it impact your choice in the secondary packaging as well? Like I can see a box behind you with lots of foiling and things like that. Has clients started saying, oh, a bit less foiling, or the foiling is still very much, you know, the way to make my product shine on the shelf and make it look super like at a jewelry store?
Completely. Foiling, exactly that, and this is where there has to be a slight compromise. Obviously, from hot and cold foiling, especially on packs and cold foiling, it can give you a sense of quality and everything that metallic inks can't quite reach. So there is still an amount of foiling being used, but there's certainly not as much as it used to be. There's a cutback in the amount of foil that's being used. As you know, with papers, and especially with label papers, you know, they're conscious about, yes, your paper comes on a reel, so that clients are now also conscious about the backing film that is being used, because a lot of that can't be recycled. But I know that Tradeoffs and others are working really hard to change that moving forward. So there are different backing papers now that you can use it, so that you can create more of a recyclable bottle. Same with glass. There are percentages of recycled glass now that go back into quite a few of the bottles. There's even one company that is producing bottles from 100% post-consumer glass, basically. So the only problem with that is that you can't guarantee the color of the glass. So the glass
That's right.
will differ from one, you know, even in one run of glass, each bottle could be slightly different because of that texture. And so it's horses for courses. There's certain places where that could work in your advantage. But if you were, for instance, using a super premium brand, an ultra premium brand on shelf, you wouldn't want that differentiation. You'd want consistency.
You're right.
You'd want
you
to
want
make sure
consistency.
that, yeah, completely.
Yeah, and when you have worked so much on brand equity and on designing something, building all the story around it across different artifacts, the last thing you want is to have different colors when they come out. A lot of clients sometimes ask us for super quality specialty papers made of recycled, post-consumer recycled fibers, and we throw our hands in the air because you cannot ensure color consistency unless you use a lot of bleach to take the ink out aggressively, and that is dangerous for the environment. And then ultimately the fibers are not going to be that resistant when you fold something. And so, and then, sometimes they make us go through all this hell, and then they plastic laminate the bloody thing. So it's like, God, what are you doing? So,
completely.
So there's a lot of miseducation about these things. And I wondered, what's the best way to let people know what the reality is behind the scenes. And, that if you want post-consumer recycled things, is probably to do something like this.
Yeah,
of which there is ample demand.
Exactly that. We had an inquiry of late from an extremely luxury brand, and their brief was, and it was actually a new product they wanted to bring to market. And our brief was, this is uber luxury, so we want you to design something that's uber luxury, but also we want something that is extremely sustainable. So it's like the two. It's like a total different ends of the spectrum. So you can't.
If they just go for color, for glass and paper, that's super sustainable. I mean, even if you go for PET with a PET bottle and it's a juice, let's say, that's sustainable too in a way. You can recycle that indefinitely. But
that's
but the uber luxury brand doesn't want PET. So let's stick to paper. Let's stick to our guns.
No, completely. But that's where you then have to have that. It's more like an education. You then have to talk about exactly that. I mean, a lot of people talking like the house bottle, for instance, as well. The house bottle is not a lightweighted bottle, but that's because it needs to feel of though it's from a certain quality.
Yeah.
Because the price you're paying for it, so it needs a certain gravitas. Exactly. So again, there's a trade-off between exactly where you go. We're doing a project at the moment. Unfortunately, confidentiality means I can't mention who the client is, but we're going through a process at the moment where, yes, they want a lighter bottle, but there's a limit to how far we can lightweight the bottle, because then it breaks, but also it falls out of where its positioning is going to be. You and I, as a consumer, would then look at it and think, well, actually, hang about, this is not the cost that I've just paid for this. This doesn't feel as though it's worth that. It feels as though it's less than that. So why should I be paying that amount of money? So there's some trade-offs. So there's lots of conversations we have to have when a client comes to us and says exactly that, uber luxury, but actually extremely sustainable. So then we have to have a conversation about, well, yes, glass, cork, paper, natural products, and yes, they're very sustainable. But when you come to us and say you want uber luxury, but you want a bottle that is only going to be weighing 300 grams, for instance,
that's against.
It just doesn't make sense. Yeah.
No, they have conflicting targets.
Exactly.
And is it easy for a designer to make this clear to like a brand director or something?
We find we have to use examples. We do it time and time again. So we have to talk them through about other products that are in the marketplace, for instance. And with consumer research as well, but showing them, it's like, okay, this is what you get if you're at this stage, and that's the maximum weight that you could actually be at for that bottle, for instance. Any lower than that, and you lose perception of quality and everything else. So yes, there are some conversations, and we do that. That's part of our job as packaging designers, but we get involved in those conversations with clients. Yes.
You're a brand therapist.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but yes, exactly. But you have to be. I think you have to. I mean, a part of our job is to know exactly that. Is to know everything inside out. Know what the current trends are. Know what future trends are coming up as well. So you have to be aware of all of that. You're not designing in a bubble. You have to be aware of everything else that's happening around you, basically. So yeah.
I have seen lately that you've, you have become very famous in the 25 years of your activity for your beautiful use of typography, among other things. You know, lots of research around that, and also from what I could see, you were one of the first to go for a very clever use of uncoated paper for the labels, coupled with this typography research and very precise and sharp printing techniques. And I've seen you going through, illustrations, and lately I've even seen some photography on the labels. And so how does that change in relation to the substrate that you then print on? If you're going for photography, do you still go for a very tactile paper, or do you choose something that makes the image sharper?
Again, it's knowing you have to be aware of everything that's available to you. So you have to do your research again about the particular papers that you may want to use, because exactly that. There are some uncoated papers that have such a smooth surface that you can, and you may have to cheat in the printing process. So for instance, you may have to seal the paper first in a particular area before you're actually going to print. You print over that, basically. But yes, you need to be, we like to try and push the envelope and do things that people aren't slightly expecting. So we like
even
to
the
experiment
printer
with
is
papers.
Probably not, even you're pushing the envelope with the printers a lot of times, huh?
We are completely. We have internally, we have one guy in particular that works on our team who's, we call him our print guru internally, because he goes and spends time at the printers, at press checks for clients and everything anyway, but we work with the printer and we're always pushing. I think if you speak to Eurostamper or anybody else, they will probably say that yes, we do push them, but I think at the end of the day, they're actually very happy with being able to do things and look at things slightly differently, because of the quality of the product.
I think you make the whole industry grow by experimenting and pushing and making, raising the bar all the time for your competitors.
Completely, and you have to do that. I mean, we do that when we're designing. It's like we always we're very critical internally of our own work, and we're always pushing ourselves to just raise the bar each time, basically. There is an old analogy in print that you're only as good as your last job, and it's actually quite true. I mean, it is very true. It's so we're always pushing to do things differently, and perhaps looking at different ways of using traditional techniques, but perhaps using them in a modern way as well. So it's just like, creative. A lot of our labels, a lot of the things we produce look as though they've been letterpress printed, when obviously they haven't. That's just being very clever about using debossing and embossing processes on the line. So it's when you introduce those to get the type looking as though it was letterpress, things like that. But again, we've worked with so many talented people over a period of time. We have a great pool of people that we use all the time. So we know what we can and can't do. But you always have to keep up to date. I mean, we're always reading about and researching and finding out about new materials, new techniques. You have to be aware of that. You can't work in a bubble, basically.
Do you work with your clients a lot with small batches and digital printing for small campaigns and, targeted, marketing shots of?
Absolutely. And digital printing, again, the advances in technology over this short period of time have changed immensely. I mean, digital printing, 5-6 years ago, entirely different to what you can do now, and especially on smaller. But also it allows you for individuality as well. You can do a lot of small batch products. You can make them all individual and slightly different using digital printing. So you can make that work for you as an advantage, definitely.
Have you used both techniques, like toner-based digital printing and also indigo-based, electronic ink?
We have completely.
You've experimented with both.
We have experimented with both, and it's finding out what's right for that particular project at that time. But yes, I love it. It's great. We're always experimenting.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to digital foiling, because that should solve, a lot of the problem of, all the
Exactly.
throwaway part of the foil and the plastic substrate to the aluminium bits.
Completely that. There's always a story to be told in packaging, and then that's what we try and do. And we try and embrace what the latest technology is to help tell that story as well when we can. So.
Have you managed, and this is my last question, to make a client change their mind completely in respect to the original brief that they came up with? You know, they came to you saying, you know, I suppose they say, you know, I've got a great product, make it fly.
Yeah.
But does the dialogue make them change their mind sometimes even about the go-to-market? Does design have that power?
It does completely, and basically the way we work in initial stages, we don't show design work as such. We show what we call them internally, we call them territory mood boards, but basically they're visuals about positioning. So a client might come to us with a very specific positioning that they think is right for the brand. But us knowing what we know and being able to work with so many people, perhaps we look at things slightly differently. We will come back with that positioning, but we may come back with 2 or 3 others that we then use as a challenge to them, basically. And sometimes exactly that, they change their mind and decide, actually, you're right with that, let's go with this because nobody else is doing this. So yes, we try and do that. We're not just we don't just take a brief and say, yes, we'll deliver that exactly how you've asked. It's always it's a 2-way process. It's a partnership, basically. So right. I think they're paying you for your services. So, you know, they're paying you as a consultant. So you should be doing that. You should be consulting, which means that you should know.
And challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. There's always a right way to do that as well. I think if you challenge something in the right way and it's taken in that vein, they will actually see the positive of that, and it helps them and the brand to grow and sell. So yeah, completely.
What about the dialogue with the printer? We've talked about how you challenge them technically. Do they sometimes come back to you saying, you know, oh, could you please could you please indicate an easier material to deal with? Could you be more accommodating with the material? Or how do they interact with the choice of the final pack?
No, again, it's a similar sort of thing. That our attitude to working with everybody is it's a partnership. So we're hopefully using you know, extremely qualified and very talented printers. So consequently, we see them as part of the same team. So early on, we will do what we call a pre-spec for a label, and we'll have discussions with them. And they may well suggest a different way of doing something or a slightly different stock that will actually produce an even better result. So that is a 2-way conversation, and we're always open to that. We're not prima donnas on press by saying that it has to be this way all the time. We will actually listen, and if it's a valid argument on why something else should be changed or done differently, we'll do it that way. But again, it's a partnership completely, and I think that's the whole thing. Is that our job as designers is to bring client and supplier together and work as a whole for the best for the packaging, basically.
How much of the cost of the final product does the label represent? On average?
Good question. On average, in alcohol, sadly, in alcohol, biggest cost of anything is tax. So you know, the government, wherever you are, you get a huge proportion of that. The label and everything is probably only down to 2 or 3% of the actual cost of the product at the end of the day. So it's actually quite low. It's not, you know, it's not a huge expense. There's lots of things that cost of goods. So it's your glass, it's your cap, the labeling, you know, it depends on if it's got a secondary pack or not. But basically, the biggest part of any of this, and all of our clients will say the same thing, it's like hate paying it, is the amount of tax that you have to pay on alcohol.
Right. But that is like a necessary evil, you know, actually.
No, completely.
Actually, it's a necessary good, you know, because tax pays for hospitals and schools, as we've all learned during this crisis.
Exactly.
But, yeah, the label is the only part that you can really read with your eyes. The rest you read with your hands, you read with the senses. I mean, the label too, but it's probably a lifesaver or a piece that you cling to, you hold on to in the sea of choice that you've got in a store.
Exactly. And a packaging, you and I as consumers, we take away, usually a brand name is not the thing that we first recall. We recall color, shape, texture. So those are the things that we mentally record. We don't realize we're doing it. We're subconsciously doing that. But there are things that you then, when you go back to look for that product, that's what you're thinking of. You're not necessarily thinking about the brand name.
No.
So those things are very important. So the label can play a huge part of that, basically, as does the bottle shape, you know, it's not in the color.
The color.
So yeah, exactly.
If there was a label that you wanted us to invent and that doesn't exist, do you want me to go back to the lab and tell them, you know, oh, you know, Ivan Bell really wants this new label to come up?
Excuse me, 1 minute and 50 seconds. We don't have much time left.
That's a good question, and something that I will think about that and come back to you.
All right, you can come back to me. Well, thank you very much, Ivan. It was a joy to see you. It was a joy to visit you in the office, in the studio. I remember all those beautiful things. And I thought you were in the studio, but look at that. That's your home.
It's a home. It looks like a mini studio here now because it just got bottles and things behind me. That's great. Look, wonderful. Thank you. Pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much. And we'll send you the
well.
bit so that you can also post it on your website if you want, or if you find it useful. And thanks a lot. I look forward to seeing you live in London and then to welcome you in Verona in November.